obsessed with is figuring out how, when Bill Gates was a sophomore in college, how was he able to sell software out of his dorm room when no one knew his name? Or how was Lady Gaga, when she was 19 years old waitressing in New York City, able to get a record deal without a single hit to her name? What I'm really obsessed with is how Steven Spielberg, when he was rejected from film school, going to Cal State Long Beach, was ditching class to sneak onto the Universal Studios lot, how he was able to become the youngest director in Hollywood history. These are the things they don't teach you in school. And I'm so obsessed with these questions that 5 years ago, I went on a quest to find the answers. And I spent thousands of hours researching, going through hundreds of biographies, talking to dozens of people and sitting down with them one-on-one and asking them the questions I was dying to know the answers to. And I'm so humbled to be able to say that, like you said, for business, I spoke to Bill Gates, for music, Lady Gaga, for computer science, Steve Wozniak, for broadcasting, Larry King, for science, Jane Goodall. It's just been an unbelievable journey. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today and share with you some of the best lessons I've learned. Now, what's interesting about the lessons, though, is that while I've learned incredible things in the interviews, the moments that have changed my life the most happened on my way to get the interviews. The adventures, the experiences, the stumbles, the failures, those are the moments that changed my life the most. And my theory is the reason why my life changed in those moments is while we learn a lot from bold-faced headlines and Business Insider articles and bullet points, the things that really change who you are happen when you go through an experience. You decide for yourself what lessons you should have learned, and that's when it really gets embedded into your being. So I want to try to give you guys that experience today. And we're going to try an experiment. Like a normal talk, I'll give 80% of my talk telling stories, and then like a regular talk, normally 20% of the talk is points and lessons and takeaways. But the experiment with you guys today is I'm still going to give my 80%, and then at the 20%, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. And you guys are going to tell each other what lessons you should have learned. You guys are going to tell each other what lessons you should take away. I think it's going to make it 10 times more fun, a lot more challenging, and a lot more interesting. So, the two stories we're going to do today are my favorite. The first one is the story of how I launched the journey and how I funded it by hacking a game show. And the second one is going to be the story of how I got one of the biggest interviews that changed my life with Larry King. Okay, the first story. About 5 years ago, I was going through a life crisis. I was 18, I was a freshman in college, and I was spending every day lying on my dorm room bed, staring up at the ceiling. I don't know if you guys have ever gone through the what do I want to do with my life crisis. Actually, I'm curious. I sort of want to survey the room. If you have gone through the what do I want to do with my life crisis, or if you're going through it, put your hand up in the air. And don't half-ass me. Give me full arms. All right, I'm going to say 99%, and the 1% are lying. Fantastic. So I was going through that, and it was hitting me really hard. It's what I thought about in the shower. It's what I thought before I go to bed. And to understand why I was going through that crisis, you have to know that I'm the son of Jewish immigrants, which pretty much means I came out of the womb, my mom cradled me in her arms, stamped MD on my ass, and sent me on my way. In third grade, I wore scrubs to school for Halloween. Like, I was a complete mess. Like, I thought that was cool. I went to pre-med summer camp. It was a disastrous childhood. But of course, like all of you guys, I checked the boxes. Study hard for the SATs, apply to college, study hard. I just kept doing what my teachers and my parents told me will lead to success, right? And it wasn't until I got to college that I started realizing something was wrong. I was hitting snooze 5 times in the morning. When I would go to my biology classes, I would sneak in business books in the back. I remember one night actually lying on my dorm room bed and looking over at this stack of bio books and feeling like they were dementors sucking the life out of me. And at first I thought, maybe I'm just being lazy. And then slowly it dawned on me, maybe I'm not on my path. Maybe I'm on a path somebody placed me on and I'm just rolling down. So now not only do I not know what I want to do with my life, I have no idea how the people who did do it, how they got started. I had no idea how, like I said, Bill Gates sold his first piece of software, or how Maya Angelou got her first book deal, or how Steve Wozniak started Apple. So I just read a bunch of books looking for answers. It was like 2014. I thought every book must have been written at that time, so I had dozens of books in my dorm room, and I'm going through them all. And eventually, I was left empty-handed. So that's when I had the naive 18-year-old thought. I said, well, if no one's going to write the book I'm dreaming of reading, why not just do it myself? And I thought it would be a super fun summer project. I would just call up Bill Gates, interview him, interview everyone else, put it into a book, and go to sophomore year. You guys are all working the media business, so you know that's not how it works. But I was a pre-med, and I'm like, of course Bill Gates will help me. He helps kids in Africa. He helps all kids. I thought Bill Gates was like our generation Santa Claus. So I think that's an easy idea. I'm like, all right, I'll just call Bill next week. This week, I need to figure out how I'm going to get money to fly to Seattle, when, of course, he says yes. So that's where the real crisis comes in, where I realize I don't have any money. I'm buried in student loan debt. I'm all out of bar mitzvah cash. I don't want to take another job. So I think there has to be another way to make some cash. So I actually was sitting in the library 2 nights before final exams freshman year. And this is where I really want you guys to start paying attention, because this is where the business lessons and the success and the entrepreneurship lessons and the sales and the risk-taking, this is when it all comes into play. So I'm sitting in the library during my freshman year, 2 nights before finals, and I'm sitting at this little wooden desk in the corner of the room. And of course, during finals week, I was doing what every college student does. I was on Facebook. And I was sitting there, and I found a friend's status that said, free tickets to The Price is Right. And of course, I had the most logical thought, why don't I just go on The Price is Right and win some money for the book? Obviously not my brightest moment, but I had a problem. The show was filming the next day, which is why the tickets were available, and no one in my school was smart enough to take the tickets, so of course I thought this is the perfect opportunity for me. But I realized not only is it filming tomorrow, I also have never seen a full episode of the show before. And again, by the show of hands, I want to know who's familiar. Who knows about The Price is Right? Show of hands? Perfect. Okay, so this story is going to be amazing for you guys. So I'm sitting there, and of course I tell myself it's a stupid idea. I have finals. But as I try to crack open my bio book, all I could think about is, what if? So just to get it out of my mind, I go and I open up my spiral notebook, and I make 2 columns, and I say best case scenario, worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, fail finals, get kicked out of pre-med, lose financial aid, mom hates me, family doesn't talk to me, look fat on TV, friends make fun of me. There were like 20 cons, and the only pro I could come up with was maybe win enough money to fund my dream. So that night I ended up doing the logical thing, and I pulled an all-nighter to study. But I didn't study for finals. I studied how to hack The Price is Right. So I go on the show the next day, and I arrive to the CBS studios, and I'm dressed crazy. I have a big black puffy jacket, a red t-shirt, neon yellow sunglasses, spiky hair. I look like a chubby toucan. And I get there, and what's interesting is the night before, I had actually, during my all-nighter, found some really interesting things. So what's your name? Angela. So the way The Price is Right works is they go, Angela, come on down. And they make it look random. What I found out during my all-nighter is that, and this is like on like the 26O of Google, this is like far into a Google search, I find out that the way it works is it's not random, it's not a random lottery. The way it works is a producer interviews every single person in the audience. Okay? But I still felt like that couldn't be the entire answer. So I'm Googling, and now this is 4 o'clock in the morning, and I find on this message board from like 1992, there's a comment that says, in addition to the producer, I think there's an undercover producer. And what the person explained is that, so the producer goes and talks to all 300 people in the audience. He says, what's your name, where are you from, what do you do? And if he likes you, he looks over to his assistant, and if he winks, the assistant writes your name down. And that makes a list of about 20 people. And then that list is given to the undercover producer who's in the audience, and he or she either checks you or X's you. All right, so now they know all that, I'm super excited. So I get to the CBS studios, and of course, I don't know who the undercover producer is, so I just assume everybody's the undercover producer. So I'm like hugging old ladies, I'm dancing with security guards, I'm breakdancing, and I don't know how to breakdance. I'm just being completely ridiculous, and finally, it's my turn to be interviewed. And the way it works is they line up 10 people at once, and Stan walks down the aisle and says, "What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do?" So of course I'm like in the zone, and he's like, "What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do?" I'm like, "Hey, I'm Alex. I'm a freshman in college. I'm a pre-med and a business major." And he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You must be super busy. How do you have time to watch The Price is Right?" And I go, "Oh, is that where I am?" Exactly, no laughs. It's the most awkward joke I've ever made. So he looks at me like, all right, this kid's a little off his rocker, and eventually I see him like looking away, and I had read in all these business books I'd recently read that human contact speeds up a relationship. So my thinking is, I need to touch Stan. So the problem is that they, of course, clearly they've had this issue before. They put you behind these metal railings so you can't touch Stan. Stan's about where you are right there. So you're Stan, I'm me. And of course, the only way I can get him over is I get the audience to chant, "Stan, Stan, Stan, Stan." And eventually he comes over. I tell him I want to make a handshake with him. Make a handshake. I teach him how to blow it up. He laughs. And he's like, "All right, kid, nicely done. You'll do great." But he walks away, and he doesn't wink to his assistant, and she doesn't write anything down. I don't know if you guys have ever been in one of those moments where everything you want is right in front of you, and you see it almost slip through your hands like sand. And the worst part is, you didn't even give it all you've got. So I don't know what took over me, but I felt this like rumbling in the pit of my stomach, and at the top of my lungs, I just started yelling, "Stan, come back!" And the whole audience shoots their head over thinking I'm having a seizure. Stan runs over. He's like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" And you have to know that Stan is wearing he's typical Hollywood, like black turtleneck, a goatee, a red scarf. And I'm just standing there, and I'm like, Stan, your scarf. And now I really don't know what I'm going to say. And Stan's looking at me. He's looking at me. I'm sweating. And he's like, "What about my scarf?" And now I really don't know what I'm going to say. And all that comes out of my mouth is I look at him with all the confidence I can, and I just go, "I'm an avid scarf collector. I have 362 pairs in my dorm room, and I'm missing that pair. Where'd you get it?" And Stan is on the floor cracking up now. He gives me the scarf, and my theory is that I think he knew what I was doing, and he was just amazed by the ridiculous extent I went through to do it. He cracks up, looks over at his assistant, gives a thumbs up. She writes my name. Now, I'm walking around in the audience, I'm waiting in line, and I see this young woman with long brown hair, and she's looking around a lot. And I look closely at her, and in her back jean pocket is a laminated badge. So of course, I know who she is, and I look at her, and I do what any chubby 18-year-old will do. I start blowing her kisses, and I blow her kisses, and then I start dancing. She's laughing. She takes out a sheet of paper. I blow her more kisses. She looks at my name tag. She makes a mark. Now, at this point, you would think I feel on top of the world, right? Well, that's when I realize that I've spent all night Googling how to get on The Price is Right. I still didn't know how the show worked. But no worries, I take out my phone, I type in how to play Price is Right. I'm reading, 30 seconds passes, I'm feeling so good. I feel a tap on my shoulder. Security takes my phone away. So now I'm just screwed. I have no plan B. That was my plan B. And I just sit on this bench next to this old woman who's also waiting in line, and I just start complaining, and I tell her why I'm here, and I tell her my story. I tell her about the book and about this crazy idea to come on the show and about finals and how I have no way of playing the game. And she looks at me and she goes, honey, you remind me of my grandson. She pinches my cheek and I go, do you have any advice on the show? And she goes, I've been watching the show for 40 years. And in 3 minutes, she downloads 40 years of wisdom into my head, and this light bulb goes off. Thanks, Grandma. And I turn over to the person next to me. I go, hey, I'm Alex. I'm 18. I've never seen the show before. Do you have any advice? And then I jump over to another group of people. Hey, I'm Alex. I'm 18. I've never seen the show before. Do you have any advice? And then to another group and another group. And within the hour, I talk to almost half the audience. They all get to know me. They all tell me their best advice because they think I'm the last person to ever do well on this show. So it was like their act of charity for the week. And finally, the doors to the studio open. And when you walk in, the place smells like the 1970s. Red velvet chairs, like flowers on the wall, flashing light bulbs, like orange and green neon colors. All that's missing is the disco ball. So I get in there, and I sit down, and I know it's game time. No more messing around. I take off my jacket, like no more time for the chubby toucan. It's game time. Put my jacket under my chair, and before I know it, I hear, live from CBS Studio in Hollywood, it's The Price is Right. And they call down the first contestant, and it's not me. They call down the second contestant, it's not me. The third, it's still not me. But the fourth, not me. So I sort of slouch back in my chair, and I think, whatever, maybe this is just a funny story. I can go back and study for finals. And the way the show works is there's 4 people at the podium, and when the first woman goes and plays her bonus round, there's an empty spot. And it's time for the 5th contestant. Alex Banayan, come on down. And of course I lose my shit. I run down the aisle. I'm like crying. I'm thanking Jesus. I'm thanking Buddha. Like my whole life is complete. I get to the podium and I'm like, before I even have a second to breathe, I hear, and now a leather chair and ottoman. I don't know, I'm a freshman in college. I don't know how milk costs. So I'm like, $400. And the audience, of course, laughs at me. And everyone else is like, $1,600, $1,700, Turns out it was like $1,500. Go figure. I'm way under. I lose that round. So it's the next round. A new billiards table. I don't know, my cousins have a billiards table. It can't be that expensive. $600. Of course, the audience laughs at me again. And everyone guesses $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. It was $1,400, so they all guessed over, so they lost, and I win by default. And I run onto the stage, and I'm so stoked, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a millionaire, this is amazing. And then they're like, I'm like, how many points did I win? And they go, you won the billiards table. So I'm like, all right. All right, so I win the prizes I get. All right, cool, got it. So it's time for my bonus round. And I'm standing there, and the doors open, and it's a giant hot tub with 12 jets for 6 people and a waterfall and LED lights. And all I can think is, if I win this hot tub, I am the king of college. So the pressure is on. So I'm sitting there, I'm standing next to Drew Carey, the host, and they give you like 10 different price options. You have to guess the right one. And I think like $2,000. It was $9,000, so I blew it. So I think I'm done with the show, and I lost, so I walk off, and they're like, we'll be right back with Alex when he spins the wheel. And I look over, I'm like, what's the wheel? So again, I want to know how familiar you guys, if you know the wheel, raise your hand. Okay, I'll take 90% of the room. For those of you who don't know, the wheel is like a giant slot machine. It's this big giant wheel with all these colored lights and glitter, and they have about 20 numbers on them. And maybe they go from like 5, 10, 15, 20, and then it goes up to 100. And if you get 100, you win extra cash. And you get to spin twice. If you get over, you're out. But closest to 100 wins. Now, I get up there. It's finally time for the wheel, and they line up 3 contestants who have won so far. This young, peppy, curly hair girl goes up, and she gives the wheel, and it goes 80, and the audience goes nuts. It's almost the closest you can get to a perfect score. It's like 80, 85, 95, 100. So she's going crazy, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this has been fun. I made it up to the wheel. It's been a good day. So I just think, all right, I'm going to give it the biggest spin I can, and it's extremely heavy. So you go 85, and the audience shoots up, and they're cheering for me like I'm their dumb younger brother who just keeps finding his way through. And everyone's just going, Alex! And I'm like, Alex, this is amazing. And then this old Latina grandma goes up, and she's the sweetest person on the show, and she goes up to spin, and I'm rooting for her. The audience is rooting for her. She gives it a spin, gets a 50. She goes up for her second spin, goes over 100. I win, and I'm going nuts because I think I've won The Price is Right. And they're like, we'll be back for the second half of the show. So I get told that the show is only halfway done, and I need to wait on the side to find out who my opponent is for the final round. So I'm waiting from the final round, and I find out who my opponent is eventually. Her name is Tanisha. She has been watching the show every day for 6 years. She's wearing tight purple leggings, a white tank top, a leather jacket. Not only did she win the opening round, she won the bonus round, and for the wheel, she spun a perfect 100. So it's pretty much like David against Goliath, and David forgot his slingshot. So it's finally time, and it's the commercial break before the show, before the final round, and I'm standing on the stage. Tanisha comes up onto the stage, and I believe in karma to an extent. So Tanisha comes up, and the whole audience is watching, and I go, hey, Tanisha, good luck. She looks me up and down and goes, yeah, you'll need it. So now the whole audience is heated, and now I'm freaking out because I realize, like, after my bar mitzvah, this may be the second biggest moment of my life, and I'm totally unprepared because everybody who had given me advice up to this point didn't give me advice on the final round. No one thought I'd make it this far. So I'm just looking around, and I have like 60 seconds, and I see Drew Carey, the host of the show, and I just instinctively throw my arms in the air, and I go, Drew, I loved you on Whose Line Is It Anyway? And I give him a hug, and he like awkwardly like taps me and pushes me away. And I go, Drew, I need to say, do you have any advice on the showroom showdown? And he goes, first of all, it's the showcase showdown. Clearly, I had no idea what I was doing. And he gives me this great advice, and finally, I have to get behind the podium. The lights come on, and it's these giant floodlights pouring into your eyes, these 6 machine gun-sized cameras in your face. I'm sweating, Tanisha's dancing, and it's finally time for the final round. And this is where it gets very interesting. So the way the final round works is they give you 4 prizes, and you have to guess them, right? So, Alex, your first prize is a trip to Six Flags Magic Mountain theme park. Blah, 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 blah. I couldn't hear the announcer over the crowd. How much do you think it is to a theme park?
For how many people?
All I hear is theme park, blah, 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 blah.
A couple $100.
$200. All right, I'm thinking about the same. I'm thinking like $50 with a can of Coke. I've seen those commercials. So I'm like, all right, cool, $50, easy, next. Your next prize is a trip to Florida. And I'm 18, and I've never booked a plane ticket before in my life, so I'm like, $100? No, at least $200. Again, I actually need to explain something about the Magic Mountain. What I didn't hear that the announcer said is that his blah, 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 blah was actually, at Six Flags, you'll have front-of-the-line passes, a butler service, a limousine for 6 people. But I think $50. And now for the Florida, for the Florida trip, I think, all right, cool, $200. Again, my blah, 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 blah was a trip for 2 on an airplane, first class, in a hotel, with a rental car. And I'm like, all right, cool, $200, easy. I'm like a diva at this point because I think like God has granted me access to the final round of the Showcase Showdown. So I'm like, all right, cool, $200. And your third prize is a trip into zero gravity. And I think this must be like a theme park themed package. So another $50 for the vomit comment. What I found out later is that this is how NASA trains their astronauts. And for every 15 minutes in zero gravity, it's $5,000. But I'm like, all right, cool, another $100, easy, next. And your grand prize, and they open the doors, and the models are there waving, and they go, a new sailboat. And of course, I lose my shit. I'm jumping up and down. I'm like, ah. And then finally, I actually look at the sailboat, and it's maybe where that wall is over there to where I am now. So the sailboat all the way over there looks a bit small, looks like a dinghy. And of course, he goes, sailboat, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, all right, the dinghy, how much does the dinghy cost? How much does the dinghy cost? And like, it can't, again, a dinghy, like, I felt pretty good about like $4,000. Again, what I didn't hear is there's a 20-foot Catalina Mark II sailboat with storage, like with a trailer. I'm like, all right, cool, $4,000, easy. And they're like, all right, Alex, all this is yours if the price is right. So I'm just thinking, I'm adding up $4,000 plus $200 plus $100 plus $50. And I'm like, I should probably round up a little. I'm calculating, the audience is yelling. And I'm just like, I just feel good. I made it this far, I feel really good. And I'm like, $6,000. Dead silence. And I'm a bit worried because the audience, of course, has been cheering all day. And I look at the audience, and it feels like, it was probably 10 seconds, but it felt like an hour. I'm like, what's going on? And then I look at Drew Carey, and he's just looking at me like. And eventually I get the hint. So I reach for the mic, and I'm like, just kidding? And everybody cheers. He goes, oh, college kids these days. All right, what's your real answer? And I'm like, oh, that wasn't my real answer. So now I'm freaking out. Like sweat patches are going under my arms. And I have no idea what to do. So I just start pounding on the podium like, audience, I need your help. And the audience starts yelling, and it's this mob. And I'm like, I'm screwed. But like a miracle, within 30 seconds, the audience starts chanting the same number. But I obviously can't hear it. But I know, and I'm just like waiting for it to be clear, and the producers are like trying to cut me off, and I'm like, I hear like the TH sound, the and I hear it, so eventually I'm like, all right, Drew, I'm going with the audience, $3,000. He grabs the mic and goes, you know there's a difference between $3,000 and $30,000? I'm like, of course, I was kidding. And he goes, great, $30,000, we're locking it in. So now I have no idea what just happened. Tanisha's like, this is going to be easy. So Tanisha gets an ATV, she gets a pickup truck, she guesses, I think, somewhere around like $35,000. Super easy for her. And now it's time to reveal the winner. Alex, you guessed, oh, actually, first they did Tanisha, so they go, Tanisha, you guessed $35,000. Retail price. $36,400, and Tanisha goes crazy. She's jumping up and down. Her friends are like standing on their chairs. She's going crazy. She just won a car, and they're like, Alex, you won, or Alex, you guessed $30,000, retail price, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just standing there at my podium, like clutching and thinking, okay, if I just leave now, it takes 30 minutes to get to school. I have 2 hours to study for bio, 2 hours to study for chem. Mom doesn't even need to know I'm here. Like, it just, all these thoughts are going through my mind, and the audience is cheering, and I'm about to walk off, and the producers are like, smile, and I'm like, you're a jerk. And I'm walking off, and as I walk off, I see my podium flashing, and I literally have to check it. I guessed $30,000, retail price, $31,200. And my face goes from this to, and I jump up and down, I high-five Drew Carey, I hug the supermodels, I jump on the sailboat, I get the sailboat, sell the sailboat, and that's how I funded my book the past 5 years. Now, this is where it gets a lot of fun. In hindsight, after the past 5 years of doing these interviews, I've realized so many of the things I've learned, I actually could have learned them if I was just paying attention on what was happening that day on The Price is Right. But I want to turn it over to you guys. I want to see hands in the air. I want you guys to share with each other what lessons you took away and what lessons each other should take away. Let's see the first hand up. And CJ in the... Right here. CJ has the mics. And over there in the yellow. What's your name?
Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth. So CJ's coming over right now to amplify your voice. Give it up for CJ, everybody.
Lessons I've taken away from what you just said for all the college students in the room is that you really should know the prices of things. That's my takeaway. I can't believe you didn't know how much I get a plane ticket. But anyway.
That's great. All right, other lessons that you took away, lessons everyone should have learned. Let's see, hands. Yep, over here. What's your name? Arash or Rosh? Nice to meet you, Raj. What school are you from?
Central Michigan University.
Everyone give it up for Central Michigan University.
So I pretty much learned, like you were asking the audience for suggestions and people outside. So if you don't know something, don't just, just keep trying to guess at things. Like, don't be afraid to ask other people, and they might have the right answer.
All right, let's see if you can just call it out. What's your name in the back? Jordan. You want to stand up, Jordan? Everyone give it up for Jordan.
I guess treating people well and like how you were like talking to everyone and trying to like make a good impression. I think that would always work well instead of like being kind of off-putting, like egotistical person as we're making nearly as far as being kind and respectful to everyone.
I love that. Snaps for Jordan. All right, who else? Who's got some really good ones? Yes, what's your name?
Hi, Joanne from Gonzaga.
Hi, you want to stand up? And here's the microphone.
Well, thanks. Intuition. I'm impressed that you talked about this, and I think all of us have maybe one time felt like your soul, your body, something's telling you like something's really right or something's really wrong. And your example and story said that, no matter all the other voices in your head that said, doctor, something inside of you said, not doctor. And you listen to that, your true voice. Intuition.
I love that. Give it up for her. Yeah, what's your name? You want to stand up?
Oh, sure. My name is Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
One thing I learned from you, whatever you do in life, do it with passion. So I admire that. And we should all learn from that.
I love that. Give it up for Hannah. I saw a hand over here, hands up over here. What's your name?
Eric.
Eric. Nice to meet you. What school do you go to?
Cal State Fullerton.
Cal State Fullerton. Give it up for Eric.
The first thing I learned is how to procrastinate for finals. Write it, watch your press, write it, and then if you have like a feeling, go for it. Don't be scared of if you can fail or anything. Like if you actually have a dream, follow it, regardless of the outcome. Because if you don't do it, you're never gonna know what if, So.
That's fantastic. All right, let's get two last ones. Yeah, over there in the back. What's your name? Hey, Dylan, you want to stand up? Everyone give it up for Dylan.
About the undercover producer thing, I was going through this analogy in my head. No, I like it. Like, you went around thinking that there was an undercover producer, just being your best self to everyone, and just treating everyone like the undercover producer of your life. Always.
Say that one more time really loud. That's amazing. That's like a bumper sticker.
Be the undercover producer of your life. Or looking or talking.
Be the undercover producer. Yeah. That's amazing. So, for me, was it your name, Joanne? So, Joanne, what you said really resonated too. And when I think back on the lesson, all of them make sense. I loved yours about treat everyone like the undercover producer. I loved yours about doing everything with passion. What really, I think, changed me the most out of all the lessons was what you said, which is when you think about that moment when I was sitting over at the little wooden table in the library, I was sort of staring at 20 reasons not to do it. And the one reason to do it was the most illogical, ridiculous idea. The odds were against me. It was 1 to 300 odds. But what I've learned from this entire experience is that there was that whisper inside of me. It was almost like somebody had tied a rope around my gut and pulled me in a direction. And what I've learned is that sometimes the lessons and the moments that change your life the most are in spite of the 200 cons. The moments that change your career forever, the moments that change the course of your life, are when you look at the illogical, you look at the ridiculous, and you say, I'm going to do it anyways. So I want to challenge you guys to listen to that whisper, all right? Now, for the second story. And I want to gauge the room. So you all work at newspapers. By show of hands, how many of you work in ad sales or on the business side? Give me full arms, don't half-ass me. Okay, amazing. So you guys are going to love this story. And I want you to think about this story from that perspective, from an ad sales perspective, all right? It's not going to make sense, but at the end, it'll all click. So this story takes place, I would say, 2 years after The Price is Right. 2.5 years after The Price is Right. I had, of course, been on my journey, and I had been rejected way more than I had thought. I had just spent 8 months writing letters back and forth with Warren Buffett, and he was just like squashing me down on each one. It was just a really heart-wrenching 8 months, and I was just at my lowest point of the entire journey. So I was going with one of my buddies from college. His name is Corwin. We were, I think, juniors at the time, and I'm sitting on the sidewalk with Corwin outside of the grocery store eating sandwiches. We're sitting on the sidewalk, and we're in LA, and we're just talking about how hard this is. Corwin's a filmmaker. I'm trying to do interviews, and we're talking about how interviews isn't just asking questions. It's like this art. And we're just talking about how it's so maddening, and of course none of us have taken a journalism class, so we're just trying to figure this all out on our own, and we're just talking about how it's just one of the hardest things that you wouldn't even expect to be so hard. And we're sitting on the sidewalk, and we're just complaining, and a car rolls up. This Lincoln with tinted windows, and it parks in the loading zone right in front of us, and out walks Larry King. So of course I freak out, and I'm just like sitting there, and I'm just like trying not to be awkward, but of course that makes me the most awkward person ever. And Corwin doesn't see it because his back is to the car. And Larry King, before I can say anything, walks away. Goes into the grocery store. And I go to Corwin and I say, yo, did you see that was Larry King? And he's like, why didn't you say anything? I thought you wanted to interview him for your book. And I'm like, at this point, like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And Corwin goes, dude, what are you saying? Like, you've just spent the past 3 years devoted to this, and you're just going to, like, flake out when it's right in front of you? And he was just giving me, like, all this shit, which what a friend does. And eventually, I'm like, I don't know if you're right, but I just don't want to be embarrassed in front of you. So I stand up, and I sort of just muster this courage, and I go into the grocery store, and I just sort of, like, mope in, and I look around the front, and of course, Larry King isn't there. But I realized, like, if I'm standing up and I'm already doing this, I might as well get into it. So I jog back to, like, the produce section, and I'm looking around, like, no Larry. And that's when it hits me. He parked in the loading zone. He's going to be out of here in 2 minutes. So now this panic sets in, and I start sprinting down the back of the aisles. I'm, like, looking down, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry. I, like, cut around the frozen fruit section. I, like, sprint down, no Larry. I get down to the checkout counter. He has to be there. No Larry, no Larry, no Larry. So I realize maybe this is like one of the biggest lessons I needed to learn in life, that if you don't act on it when it's right in front of you, you'll lose it. So I look down to the floor, and I walk out into the parking lot, and I lift my gaze, and right in front of me is Larry King. And of course, just like that stand moment, like I don't know what gets into me, but I just at the top of my lungs yell, Mr. King! And he jumps up, and by the way, he's 80 years old and has like quadruple bypass surgery. And he looks, I'll never forget this look. He looks over his shoulder like this. And like the look of death is in his eyes. And I know I've like come too far to back out at this point. So I chase after him, and he starts making it straight for his car. And I'm like, Mr. King, Mr. King, Mr. King. And he's like, what? And I'm like, my name's Alex. I'm like 20 years old. I'm a big fan. Like, I want to learn how to interview. I've just always wanted to say hi. And he goes, okay. Hi, and keeps walking. So now I'm like, oh my God, and I'm just following him down the sidewalk to his car, and he just keeps looking over at me, surprised that I'm still there. And he's like clicking open his car, like pops open the trunk, puts his groceries in, opens the front door, and I go, wait, can I can I go to breakfast with you? He just looks at me like, who is this kid? And I'm just like, and before he can respond, we both look around, and on the sidewalk are about 15 people watching this go down. So now Larry King's looking at the 15 people, he's looking at me, and he goes, okay. And I'm like, oh, amazing, thank you so much. And I'm so ecstatic. And he gets into the car, and he's about to close the door, and I go, wait, what time? And he looks at me and slams the door. And I'm like, oh no. Mr. King, what time? He looks at me again, turns on the car engine. Mr. King, what time? He like puts it in drive. I'm now standing in front of his car windshield. Mr. King, what time? He's like, 9 o'clock, and speeds off. So now it's the next day, and Corwin and I show up at 9 o'clock. Feeling good. The entire night before, I had read like his entire biography. I was like so dialed in. I get there, and he's sitting at the opening table right at the restaurant, and I'm like, hey, Mr. King, good morning. And he's like, I'm like, okay, so I'll sit at this table over here, and I sit at the table next to him, and Corin and I just sit there. There was an open seat at his table, and he's sitting with about 4 of his friends. They sort of look like, you guys know like the Muppets in the balcony? With all due respect, I love Larry King. I think he might agree. But they're all sitting there like hunched over their Cheerios. And I shouldn't have said that. But anyways, he's sitting there at the table. I'm sitting there, and I'm just waiting for him to call me over when the time is right. He had invited me. So Corin and I are just sitting there, like 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes pass, 30 minutes, an hour, nothing. And then finally, around like an hour and a half, he gets up and starts walking towards the door. And I'm just like, Mr. King, was this still a good time? And he's like, what is it, kid? What do you want? And I'm thinking like, screw this, like it's not worth it. I just look up at him, and I'm like, honestly, I just wanted some advice on how to interview. And this smile takes over his face. And he like puts his hand on my shoulder and gives me the best 1 minute of interview advice I've ever heard. And do you guys want to hear the advice? So he tells me, the advice he says is, look, a lot of kids your age come up to me and ask the same question. And the best thing I can tell you is stop doing what you're doing, because I know what you're doing. He goes, you're looking at my interviews. You're looking at Oprah's interviews. You're looking at Barbara's interviews. And you're thinking, how can I be like that? He said, that's the biggest mistake you can make. Because what you're doing is you're looking at what the interviewer is doing. You're not wondering why they're doing it. Larry King has this very simple question, open-ended. Oprah has this very emotional twist with the narrative. Barbara Walters has this battle plan. It's not about what they're doing, it's about why they're doing it. And why they're doing it is because that's the style that makes them the most comfortable in their seats. And when they're the most comfortable, your interview subject is the most comfortable. And that's what makes for the best interviews. So he tells me this, and I say, thank you so much. And he goes, you know what, kid? Tomorrow, 8:45, see you here. And I'm so excited, and I come back on Monday at 8:45, and he's like, kid, what do you want? Why are you chasing me? And I tell him about the book, and he's like, I love it, I'm in. He's like, tomorrow, breakfast. I come back the next day, and then I come back the day after that, and over the past 5 years, I've had breakfast with him over 50 times. Now give it up for Larry King. Now, I really want you to think about sales and business when you think about this story. All right, whose hands are going up first? All right, we got 2 over here. What's your name? Right over here. Victoria, give it up for Victoria. Victoria, you want to stand up?
One word, persistence.
Persistence.
Yes.
Amazing. Yes, what's your name?
Rob.
Hi, Rob. What school do you go to? Here, let me give you the mic.
Loyola, Chicago.
All right, give it up.
is looking at it from a business point of view, is that's not just necessarily, hey, I want to interview with you. That's, I want a relationship with you, Larry King. And evidence of that is you went 50 times over the past year going to see him. So it's about a relationship, not necessarily getting sales.
That's amazing. I love that. Yes, what's your name?
Jen, I'm from McClatchy.
Nice to meet you. You want to stand up?
I just want to say I think you're just being really real with him. And I think he sensed that, and I don't think that he probably gets a lot of that because he is a celebrity. So I just really appreciate that.
I love that. Thank you. All right, let's get some over here in the back. Hands, hands, hands. Yes, what's your name?
Gage.
Nice to meet you. What school do you go to?
I go to the KU.
KU. Give it up for KU.
I think a lot of us in ad sales get caught up in just selling like the what, selling like the products and everything, but really selling the why, like the reasons why, like the interviews we're doing it. I think it's a really important thing, especially when selling the products that we offer as well. So selling the why is ultimately what the consumers buy, and that's exactly.
Say that one more time again.
Selling the why is ultimately what consumers buy, and that's exactly what we need to be pitching.
Tell me what's the why for your newspaper?
The why for our newspaper is that we're the #1 student voice for the University of Kansas. We have 26,000 students out there, and the Kansas is the #1 source of news and the #1 way to get into contact with the student body.
That's fantastic. All right, other hands? Point me around. Yes, what's your name? Molly. Nice to meet you, Molly. Give it up for Molly, everyone. Show her some love.
So your story is the perfect story that goes along with this quote that I heard that successful people wake up every morning and look for opportunities, and if they can't find the opportunities, they create them.
That's fantastic. I love it. Okay, do you know what I'm going to do? Everybody take out their phone for a second. Take out your phone, and this just sort of stays in the room. Open up an email or open up a notes. Write down my email. I literally, because I'm about 90% done with the book, I want to hear every lesson that you took away. Any question you have, I want to be a resource. Write down my email. It's alex@alexbanayan.com, and that's Banayan. Obviously, please don't post it on Twitter, but send me any questions, any lessons, any key points. Yeah, what's your name?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your name?
My name's Megan.
Hi, Megan. You want to stand up? Give it up for Megan, everyone.
My question for you is, so initially with The Price is Right, you were all about it. There were no doubts, you were a little bit obviously nervous because the chances were so slim. But when you saw Larry King, you were so passive and you had doubts. And literally he walked right into your life, and you had to have your friend push you to do that. So I'm curious as to why you had so much doubts right away. When he was right there, you didn't just jump on it. If you remember.
That's an incredible question. Yeah.
Sorry, it wasn't really Q&A. But.
No, questions, lessons, whatever you guys want. So her question was, why with The Price is Right was I so excited and confident, and why with Larry King was I so beat down? And the truthful answer is, I think that's sort of how life works. There's just ebbs and flows. And I think one of the best assets of most of you guys in the room is, and myself included when I was going on The Price is Right, is when you're so young and you don't know what doesn't work, everything works. And the difference between where I was in my life is with The Price is Right, I was just so optimistic because I didn't know how the world worked. And about 2.5 years in, I was beat up so much. I can literally go through a list of 50 to 100 people, whether it's Oprah or Sonia Sotomayor or Ariana Huffington. There's just 100 people who have just not only said no. One time, Wolfgang Puck, I spent a week tracking him down, gave me a hug. And I love the guy, but this is just what happened. He gave me a hug, and he said, the book sounds great. Email my assistant. Next week, come to lunch in my kitchen. We do the interview. And of course, his assistant said he's not going to do the interview. Now, that doesn't mean that he's a bad person. It doesn't mean he doesn't like me. It just, you don't know what's going on in his life. But of course, when I was 19, every rejection was personal. Because I had mistaken people rejecting the book for their own business or press reasons between me being rejected as a human being. And it's really simple to get that mixed up into, it's funny, your question is something I've thought about a lot. And I've realized that many times we think of life about success and failure. If I did well, that's a success, and if I failed, that's a failure, right? And what I've really tried doing ever since that Larry King experience is to stop attaching my self-worth to success versus failure. If I did well, I'm a good person. If I did bad, I'm a bad person. And I've started attaching my self-worth to trying. Because if you think about it, success and failure aren't opposites. They're actually the same result of trying. So the opposite of success isn't failure, it's apathy. It's not trying. So that's sort of been the best secret I've gotten over the past couple of years to sort of get rid of that Larry King slump and just sort of keep the energy up. So thank you for that question. That was great. Give it up for her. Okay. Hi, what's your name? Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Would you like to stand up?
I would love to.
Thank you. Give it up for Elizabeth.
That conversation just reminded me of a quote that my mom always told me and my mother always told her, and I always tell my students this, and you have to really think about it, but it's so true, especially when you're young. It's very easy to take things personally when you're getting started. But how people treat you has more to do with them than it does to do with you. You have no idea what that person is going through. And that's in life and in business and in sales, especially in sales. You can't take that personally. You don't know what they're going through. So just keep that in mind throughout life. How people treat you has way more to do with them and what's happening with them than it does to do with you.
Yes. Thank you. That's fantastic. Yes, what's your name? Hi, Jessica. You want to stand up? Sure. Everybody give it up for Jessica.
I'm a journalism major, and I know that this kind of goes hand in hand. I know a lot of you are journalism majors too. With when you're selling too, how do you get people at a young age, like yourself at a young age, how do you get other people that are older in that industry to take you seriously? Like when you're trying to sell them things or when you're trying to interview them. That's kind of difficult.
That's great. Okay, there's the serious, thoughtful answer I can give to you, and then there's my favorite answer. So one of the best salespeople I've ever met, and he wouldn't call himself a salesperson, but it's just one of his many skills. His name is Elliot Bisnow, and he runs an organization called Summit Series, and they bring together like Bill Clinton and Richard Branson and Ted Turner, and they put him on a cruise ship, and it's an amazing experience. But Elliot actually got his start in ad sales. His dad had a newsletter, and he just sold ads on the newspaper and just made cold calls. Now, Elliot started doing this when he was a sophomore in college. It was in between his summer, between sophomore and junior year. And your question was, how do you get people to take you seriously? So this is how Elliot would do it. And Elliot's one of the people I've interviewed. And the way he would go, and how old are you? 22. He was, I think, 21. 20. So Elliot would go, and this is summer vacation. He was living in Washington, D.C. And first, how do you get customers? He just opened the Washington Post. It was a real estate newsletter he was working for. So he opened the Washington Post, went to the real estate section, saw who was advertising there, and he's like, all right, I'll poach their customers. So he just made a list of all the people who were advertising, and he just one by one started calling them. And he'd be like, and of course he has no idea what he's doing. And he goes, hey, this is Elliot. Who buys ads for your company? Click, they hung up. And then he called back the next day. Hey, this is Elliot Bisnow. I was just speaking with someone about ads. Can you tell me what her job title was again? And they're like, oh, that was our marketing manager. He goes, great, can I speak to her? And they're like, nope, click. The next day, hey, Elliot Bisnow, can I speak to the marketing manager? Nope, click. Hey, this is Elliot Bisnow. Who's the marketing manager? Oh, that's Jessica Rodriguez. All right, great, thank you. Jessica Rodriguez. A week later, Elliot Bisnow for Jessica Rodriguez, please. One moment, ding, ding, ding. So that was the first, so that's how he got his foot in the door, and he did that for a month, and finally after a month, he got his first in-person meeting, and he like shows up in his suit, and he's like all buttoned up, and he gets there, and he had read that most business people, if you give them like a silver or a bronze, a silver, and a gold package, they'll always choose the middle. So of course, like on a sheet of printer paper, he walks into the meeting, and he makes his pitch, and this man at this big real estate company goes, all right, Elliot, let's see the pricing structure. He like hands over the sheet of printer paper, and the man goes, we will take the silver. And Elliot's like, oh my God, I just made $1,000. And he like plays it cool, And now he has no idea what to do next, so he just goes, I want to make sure I do what feels best for you. How do you normally like to proceed? And the guy goes, well, normally you send me an insertion order. And Elliot goes, of course, and writes down a notepad, Google insertion order. So the true answer, and it actually gets even more ridiculous, Elliot, after that summer, went back to his dorm room, and every morning at 5 a.m. was just making cold calls and cold calls. He made like a $50,000 sale and a $100,000 sale. And within a year in his dorm room, he made $1 million worth of ad sales from his dorm room. And the funniest part is he didn't want to tell people it was his dorm room, so he would tell all the marketing managers, yes, please send it to, I think, where was he going? University of Minnesota. Yes, that would be in, I think it was like Hentley Hall, Suite 302. This is, of course, our Minnesota office. We have our DC branch and our Los Angeles branch. Yeah, I just said that's where we do our accounting. So I wanted to give you a really truthful answer, but I'll just tell you what works, which is you just sort of do what it takes. And the truth is, some people might not take you seriously, but if they're good people, which most people are, they'll take you under their wing. That was a great question. All right, takeaways from the Larry King, lessons or questions. Yes, and you'll be our last person. What's your name? Oh, we already did you. What's your name again? One more time?
I was just curious.
Yeah. Rob.
Did you end up finishing your degree?
Did I end up finishing my degree? The answer is I haven't. I took a leave of absence in 2012. And the bigger story is I loved college. And I was 2 years done with college. I was going into my junior year. And it was, to be honest, it was actually the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. Because even though I didn't drop out, even taking a leave of absence was such a big deal. And the only reason I did it is because I had spent 2 years chasing after Bill Gates, and his chief of staff in his office said, we'll only do the interview if you have a book deal. We're not going to do an interview for like a blog. And at that point, I had finally got a literary agent, and the only way I knew in my heart to get a book deal was to give it 100% of my energy. Because even most authors who give 100% of their energy barely get a book deal. So I thought I can't half-ass it and be half school, half book deal. So I was like, all right, I'm going to just take 1 semester off. And of course, when I told that to my parents and my grandparents, all hell broke loose. And it's funny in hindsight, but truthfully, when you realize that my grandparents and my parents fled Iran 35 years ago from a revolution and came to this country and sacrificed everything to save enough money to give me an education, from their perspective, I was throwing it all away. So it was definitely the hardest decision of my life.
Are you going to finish it?
We'll figure that out. Right now, I got to finish this talk, but thank you. Give it up for Rob. Now, we've talked about persistence, we've talked about passion, we've talked about ad sales, we've talked about Larry King, we've talked about Elliot, we've talked about all the different people I've interviewed. The real question is, what do they all have in common? Because when you look at all these people on paper, whether it's Maya Angelou or Bill Gates, they have nothing in common. They've, of course, achieved extraordinary things, but other than that, it's pretty different. Maya Angelou grew up in rural Arkansas. Bill Gates was in the wealthiest part of Seattle. Warren Buffett's dad was a congressman. Pitbull's parents were drug dealers. Like, on paper, there's nothing in common until you start listening to the stories. And the reason I say listening is that it took me about 3 years until I finally started sharing the stories that I learned from the interviews, that I realized, almost like a musical soundtrack, there was a common melody to all the stories. And what I've realized is every single one of these people treat life exactly the same. They all treat life and business and success exactly like a nightclub. Okay, you see, there's 3 ways in to a nightclub, right? There's the first door where everybody waits in line hoping to get in. That's 99% of society, and that's where the line curves around the block. That's where the bouncer is there, and you have your resume in your hand, and you just hope the bouncer lets you in. That's 99% of the world waits at the first door. And then there's the second door, where the VIPs go through, where the celebrities and the billionaires, And of course, that's not me, that's not most of us. And society has a way of making you feel like those are the only two ways in. You either wait in line at the first door and pay your dues and wait your turn, or you're a celebrity or you're rich. What I've learned over the past 5 years, interviewing all these people, is that there's always the third door. And that's the door where you jump out of line, run down the alley, bang on the door 100 times, crack open a window, go through the kitchen, there's always a way in. And whether that's how Bill Gates sold his first piece of software, or how, like I said, Spielberg became the youngest director in Hollywood history, they all took the third door. And while you guys are here until Saturday or Sunday, I want you to have that in mind. Each session you attend, each person you meet, I want you to have that concept in the back of your mind. When you go back to your newspapers, when you go and plan the next 5 years of your career, 10, 15, I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about how you can live that. I want you to choose to never wait in line. I want you to choose to run down the alley. I want you to choose to bang on the door, choose to take risks, choose to be bold, and choose to take the third door. Thank you.